Hello guys, today we're going to explain how you should position your hand to train finger strength, whether it's for maximum strength, endurance strength, or whatever it may be. Why you need to position your hand in a certain way, why you need to work with different joint ranges at the anatomical level, and why you have to do it, and why, besides that, modern training has to be with a hangboard. Let's start by saying that the muscles, there are many muscles responsible for closing the hand, okay? But the two muscles truly responsible for generating the strength that will allow you to keep climbing are only two, which are here: the superficial flexor and the deep flexor of the fingers, okay? And when one climbs, it must be clear that those two muscles are the ones that will generate all the strength so that you can hold on with your fingers. It is true that there are more muscles. There are the extensors, the lumbricals, the interossei, some intrinsic muscles of the palm, etc. But to make it a bit more understandable, in reality, there are only two muscles: the superficial flexor and the deep flexor of the fingers. The other concept you need to be clear about is that when one is climbing, the muscular work done by these two muscles is isometric. What does isometric mean? It means that when one places the hand on the crimp, it means that the muscle neither stretches nor contracts. It remains static, and that's why it's called isometric. Obviously, in this matter, there are nuances, but let's assume for you to understand that the muscle does not move. That is the range of motion, and when I am here producing this force, is that my hand does not move. Why? Because the holes do not move just like that. So from that point of view, we already know that there are two muscles and that this muscle should not move, which is an isometric contraction. The way you have to do the finger strength work has to be something that resembles the sport you are doing, but it doesn't necessarily have to be the same. Here, there is a discussion. For many years, it was said that one had to train on small holds, and that will be the topic of another video. But the truth is that what we need is to generate load on muscles and on the central nervous system, and working on very small holds means that we are putting a lot of stress on pulleys, tendons, joints, and not necessarily a lot of load on the muscles, because ultimately what I want to want is for this muscle to hypertrophy, generate more strength, and for the central nervous system to send more signals. So the current modern training, the one being done at the moment, is not such a small hold, because with a not so small hold, I can generate more load on my muscles. I can activate my central nervous system more. And what I want, in a way, is for this muscle to become strong and not break my joints. Later, when I take that to climbing and can be on small holds, that's another problem. But that's why working on a hangboard with a dynamometer or whatever has to be on larger holds to not destroy the pulleys or the joints, and to be able to keep the muscle trained. Later, if you want to say, hey, but then we're going to climb on small holds and everything else. Yes, but you have to do that back here in the what's it called? On the climbing wall. Why? Because one thing is to generate strength. The strength that I will gain by training specifically on a hangboard. And another thing is the coordination that I will apply to my hands on small holes or on large holes or on slopers or whatever. Therefore, that thing about the small hole train there, no, I'm not doing that now. And I haven't been doing it for years, at least 5 years since I stopped. Yes, about 5 or 4 years, especially when Tindeq appeared. I'm not doing it anymore. That's exactly how it is. All my trainees are using large holds. A short announcement. Finger Strength and Tindeq course lasts 5 hours. finger strength planning course lasts 7 hours. The videos are already recorded, so if you want them, you can buy and watch them immediately. And if you also want to train with me, just write to me on Instagram, whether it's for the Tyndale finger strength courses, finger strength planning, or if you want to train with me. We're talking about 20 and 25 millimeters. The other thing you should have is a dynamometer. In my case, I'm using the Tindeq and this. This is the third Tindeq I have, okay? And I've been using it for about 4 years, practically since it appeared. And all modern training should be with a hangboard, a block for one hand, and with a Tindeq. But you can also see that here, guys, because it's not the topic of this video, but rather how to position the hand, but just so you can get an introduction. So here we have our block. I am using this block, which is the 20 block, 25, which in the case of this toy, well, it has a 20 rod, the normal one, and a 25 rod, okay, but staggered, okay, where the hand remains anatomically more ergonomic. But if we turn this around as well, it also has a 20 rod, staggered, and it has a normal 25 rod. So the different ways I can hold the edge to train, I will first do it on a classic 20 millimeter edge, okay? Let's hold it here. The most commonly used grip, especially on a rock, is the full crimp, where I place my thumb over my index finger, and it can even be over the index and the ring finger. No, the middle finger, sorry, all right? And I'm going to do it here and pull. This type of grip is very good biomechanically for generating load, for generating strength. Why? Because it uses a lot of structures in your hand, such as the fact that the thumb is over the index finger, and it can even be over the middle finger. So I have all my flexors, both superficial and deep activating, but I also have the flexor of the thumb. This grip has been shown to have up to 40% more strength if I only use the fingers, the phalanges from the second to the fifth, from the index finger to the pinky, okay? Therefore, this grip is one of the most used because in a way, you can generate a lot of strength with it, but it has its problems, meaning, why? Being a grip that I can pull a lot from, can it cause many problems? Because mainly there is a hyperextension of the distal phalanx over the middle phalanx, and that makes the load on the pulley very, very extreme. And being very extreme, it is one of the grips that, although it is stronger, also produces a lot of tension on tendocartilaginous systems. So it can cause, for example, pulley ruptures. And not only pulley ruptures, but it also produces a lot of stress on the joint between the first and second phalanx, between the second and third phalanx. So from that point of view, everything you do always, although it may have a benefit, also has a cost. And the cost is that you are putting too much stress on your joints, pulleys, tendons, etc. So from that point of view, you should try to use it only when necessary. Example, on very small holds, one should use a full crimp. Why? Because you need to use everything you have in your hand to generate the force on that small hold to keep climbing. But for example, on holds of 15, 20, you can practically release the thumb and use an open crimp, which is what we are going to talk about now. The second grip that we are going to see is the open crimp, as it is called. It has several names, but we will call it open crimp, which is the same as what was used before, but the thumb is released. And this not only reduces the strength, reduces the load that one can apply, but the hyperextension of the first phalanx, that is of the distal phalanx over the middle phalanx, tends to disappear. So from that point of view, you put less stress on the pulley, so it is said to be a grip that is, in theory, a bit gentler on your hand, but it also produces less strength. So does it produce fewer benefits? Yes, it produces fewer benefits, but does it produce fewer costs? It also produces fewer costs. And here comes the wonder of being able to train. If you only train with an incomplete crimp grip, you will still you will learn to generate strength on your muscles, on your central nervous system, and sooner or later, you can end up generating as much strength as if you were doing it with a full crimp. Currently, I am no longer doing never an incomplete crimp. One, because I have some minor injuries, and another because I have learned to train very well without having to do the full crimp. Okay? And from that point of view, it is a type of grip that puts less stress on the pulleys, puts less stress on the interphalangeal joints, and places much more load on the muscle and the central nervous system. So I keep the load on the central nervous system on muscles, but I also maintain load on the pulley. So in a way, I am also training the pulley. It's a detail that sometimes I only train with an open grip. For example, here in, what's it called? In 25 staggered, I tend to do it open. And from that point of view, I take a lot of stress off my pulleys, and I could train with only an open grip. Okay? But from that point of view, since I'm never putting stress on my pulleys don't get strong. And from that point of view, Yon, when I train specific finger strength, what I need is also to put load on my pulleys so that my pulleys become strong. Okay? It's that simple. And that's why incomplete crimping, okay, should be used in a training plan. Not only to make your muscles stronger and your central nervous system recruit better, but also because that way I make my pulleys strong as well. Next, the following will be the fourth type of grip. The fourth. And why not the third? I will explain it to you. The fourth type of grip would be an open crimp. Here is the open crimp, which I don't do very well because on such a small crimp, it's very difficult to do it open. I'm going to take this one, okay? And we're going to set it to 20. I put this here. I'm going to move a bit. See? And here I am already on a 25 millimeter edge. And there it does tend to be a bit more open. But for one to be able to train with an open grip, what appeared is the staggered grip. The staggered grip, let's move this a bit here, is a type of grip that has become very trendy in the last year, but it especially appeared about 2 years ago. And it makes it so that anatomically your hand, when it closes, does this. So it forms like an arch. Right? So the staggered grip tends to mimic that arch that one makes with the hand. So when one wants to work on an open grip, the staggered grip is Wonderful. Why? Because one can work on the open grip ergonomically much better. And besides, and this is independent of the type of grip, the staggered grip can also make it so that all 4 fingers are doing the work of crimping with the pinky and the index finger, also crimping in a perfectly anatomical way. But in this case, well, we are talking about the open grip, right? In that case, as I mentioned earlier, the pulleys tend to rest because they stop doing what they had to do. And I mean, they continue, the pulleys do start to be used, but they won't be under much stress. And in this case, the muscles, mainly the superficial and deep flexor, tend to lengthen a bit. And from that point of view, the joint range changes. When one refers to joint range, it means that how I, by opening and closing the finger, in this case, I change my joint range. I change the way I am contracting the finger, right? But that also means that my muscle lengthens or contracts a bit more. And those different lengthenings and contractions in which one can work on finger strength or the strength of whatever change. Why? Because the neurons say, look, now we have to send the signals in a different way. And at the same time, the muscle says, look, I am elongated in a different way. And those differences in joint range, those differences in increased elongation or decreased elongation of the muscle, make the muscle become something stronger, right? And it's important that I told you that to work specifically on fingers, I have to do it with a hangboard, and in this situation, and with a large edge. But in real life, when you go to the wall or to rock, you know, the number of holds you are going to take will be many. So as long as I can work on different joint ranges, it means that my muscle, in terms of strength, will be better prepared. And this will be the topic of another video. What matters most, in a way, for one to perform back there is not just strength, but also coordination. But that will be for another day. So the third grip that we are going to do is, it has been given many names. It's like between an incomplete crimpo and an incomplete open grip. I will try to explain it. In this case, what essentially happens is that the middle finger ends up crimped, while the index and ring fingers tend to remain, extended, and the little finger tends to drop. So the problem with this is that the joint range of one finger compared to another is different. And what I have seen that the middle finger experiences a lot of stress on the pulley. So this type of grip is neither one thing nor the other. And besides, I'm putting a lot of stress on just one finger on the pulley. Therefore, this type of grip, which is often replicated when climbing, is a problem. It should not be used and should be changed either to a half crimp or an open grip. One thing I didn't mention is that in staggered, when working with an open grip, the pinky finger tends to stay where it should. The problem with working on crimps, the classic crimp of all time, is that when using an open grip, the pinky finger tends to fall off. So that means I have a portion of my hand that is not working. Remember that the flexors, both superficial and deep, are muscles for 4 fingers, both the superficial and the deep. But the fact that the pinky is not working means that vectorially the muscle is not working in the best way. So ideally the pinky finger should be up. That later in real life, I'm only gripping with 3 fingers for each of these open grips. That's another issue. But again, I insist, one thing is to train specifically And another thing is to apply it in real life. This is solely to focus on my muscle, to focus on my central nervous system, and then to apply this in real life. And in that case, it's about coordination. So we have the 4 grips that one should use to strengthen the fingers. And in that case, I repeat, they are full crimp, which should never be used, partial crimp, which is one of the ones I use the most, odd open crimp, which I already mentioned, and finally, the open grip, where in a normal crimp, the pinky tends to slip out, or we can use it staggered, where the pinky stays where it should be. The classification consists of these 4 types of grips. The ones you should use for training should be the second partial crimp, and the 4th, which should be the open grip. And currently, and based on evidence, and largely based on experience, you should start training both crimps and crimps that are ideally 20 millimeters and above, 20 and above, okay? Not 18, not 15, not 10, and staggered grip, which in my case is 20 and above. In fact, many of the trainings with open and staggered grips are 25. And with those 2 types of grip, that is, with the incomplete crimp plus the open grip, ideally staggered, okay? You can do a specific an intense finger workout where your finger strength improves by 20, 30, 40%, depending a bit on where you started, where you can do maximum strength work, where you can do strength endurance work, where you can do recruitment work, etc., etc. And those 2 are enough. There is evidence that proves it. Why? Because he who grasps at too much holds little. And that's wonderful for climbing. Then someone might say to me, no, but look, in this grip, there are 2 finger pockets, there are 10 millimeter edges, there are 15 millimeter edges, there are flat edges, there are open edges, there are whatever edges, there are slopers, etc., etc. They are right. But one thing is to gain strength while climbing, where coordination comes into play, and you always have to do it. And another thing is the specific training for finger strength. And there are many authors who have mentioned you get strong to climb, not to do finger exercises. It doesn't make any sense. So with just those 2 grips, you have 90% of the maximum specific finger strength work to take to the wall. I remind you, I work a lot with the boulder and with Tindeq, and a lot. I have all my students working with the boulder and Tindeq. But what really matters is the end goal, that they can climb better. It doesn't make any sense that here they've increased their maximum strength by 30% and then do nothing on the wall. And how do you improve on the wall? By climbing. That's why some of my students don't do any specific finger strength work. They focus solely on climbing. And when you measure them, I have students who came here, doing a 35 of peak load. And after 2 months of specific climbing, without ever doing finger strength work on a hangboard or with Tindeq, they increased to 50 units. So you have to be very discerning that one can improve finger strength just by climbing. And if you want something more specific or want to push limits, you can do it here. But using 1,000 grips, no, I'm going to work on a 10 millimeter edge, now 15, now 20, now here, now there, makes no sense. Because ultimately, I insist again, and that's why I started with those. There are only 2 muscles, only. And with just 2 joint ranges, I'm almost covering everything. Now, this needs to be taken with a grain of salt, because specific work, for example, on slopers, needs to be done on a board, but that's for another video that will come later. I'm sorry. All right, guys, if you liked the video, well, a like as always, subscribe, and you'll see many topics, because this is just an introduction. A hug, guys.